Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you had a very good day. I had a very good day. Part of my very good day was watching the children sliding on the slip and slide on the bank over here. Did you witness that today? That's worth it right there, just coming to listen to that, screaming and yelling and laughing. And it brought back many memories that I have had over the years as a child going to camp meetings just like this one. And the joy that comes not only from singing songs about God and attending meetings and doing crafts and all the things that kids do, but also the play that's involved in something like this. And it's an important time for the little ones as well. So, in our household, there exists a continuum of shower duration. A continuum of shower duration. My wife, born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, is an environmentalist. She wishes to conserve water, and so she takes very short showers. I, on the other hand, believe that cleanliness is next to godliness. I take very long showers. Our little 3-year-old William is really still more of a tub guy. But Audrey, our 8-year-old, and this has been true since the beginning, will drain the hot water tank to the very last drop. And we have to be very careful about where she's placed in the order of showers, or the rest of us are in really bad shape. Several years ago, she was probably 3-4 years old, we were at a rustic setting where I was preaching, and we were put into a cabin. And I remember one morning getting my little 3-4-year-old girl all set up into the shower, thought I had everything just right. I wandered to the other side of the cabin, and all of a sudden I hear screams, "Daddy, Daddy, please come quick. Daddy, come quickly." I thought, what is up? I don't understand. And so I make my way into the bathroom, into the shower. "Daddy, Daddy, the water's so cold." Now this was odd because I thought I had set the temperature just right. "Daddy, it's so cold, do something." I put my hand up right under the shower head where the water was coming out, and it was almost on the hot side. And I thought, this is bizarre. "Daddy, it's so cold." And then I noticed it. The shower head had been broken, and out came this fine mist that wafted and floated to the ground. 104 degrees here, but by the time it made it all the way down to my daughter's head, it was cold water at that point. "Daddy, Daddy, do something." I said, "Audrey, I don't know what to do." I tried to explain in the best way I could to this 3-4-year-old girl. "Daddy, do something." "What do you want me to do, Audrey?" "Daddy, pick me up, pick me up." And so I rolled up my sleeves and picked up my little girl so that she could have a hot shower. Isn't it true? We live in a cold world. And we so desperately want Jesus Christ to pick us up and lift us into the warmth of our Heavenly Father. In fact, I think we show up at events like this, at gatherings called worship services, at church every week. And you know what I think we're hoping for? We're hoping that somehow we might be lifted even for a moment out of the cold, harsh realities of our lives, full of pain and disappointment and struggle, the apparent distance from God, that somehow, even for a little while, we might be lifted into the warm, healing presence of God. But how does this happen? Tonight, for a few moments, I'd like to talk about what I believe is the core of Christian worship. I believe it's the thread that goes all the way through everything we do, from singing and prayers and testimonies and preaching the thing that ties it all together. And it may not be what you think. It may not be what we often suppose. Let me set it up this way. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were unpacking boxes. Most of what emerged expected, uneventful, but occasionally a surprise. My wife was unpacking a box, had such a moment. I heard her squeal, "Oh, look, my stickers!" She grabs something out of her hand and runs outside to the back of her car and puts a sticker on the back of it, on the back window. I went out there, and so I decided I'm going to take a picture of this, and I think I have that picture for you tonight. There she is. My wife, the marathon runner. Yes, and I'm proud of my wife. Short showers, and she runs marathons. It's amazing. I did well. I married up. So we're continuing to unpack boxes, and I'm thinking, I wish I had a sticker for the back of my car. And so on Monday of that week, I ordered this sticker, confessing that I am, in fact, not a marathon runner. So here it is. If you're like me, you've racked up a few 0.0s in your life. If you were to line the panels of your car of places where you have failed, places where you're weak, places where you are broken. Yes, we all have a few 26.2s. But the truth is, we have these haunting 0.0s, these places of weakness, of failure, the lack of accomplishment that we carry with us. And this, ironically, is the beginning place for where worship can truly have meaning, and we can be lifted from the cold waters of the world into the warmth of the Father. Now you may be thinking, where is this preacher going tonight? Stay with me for a second. A few months ago, I had the privilege of witnessing a presentation by a doctorally trained social worker by the name of Bryan Brown. Here's a picture of her, perhaps some of you will recognize. Dr. Brown conducted over a decade's worth of research, hundreds and hundreds of interviews, people from all walks of life, rich and poor, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic groups, all kinds of different people with a variety of experiences for years. And she started to ask this question. She noticed that some people were, in her words, wholehearted. They were full of courage. They weren't bound up by the negative opinions of others. They were free, and they were generous, and they were strong. Yet other people did not have these qualities. They were in bondage to the negative opinions of others. They were not risk takers. They were not free. They were not fully hearted people. And Dr. Brown is wondering, all of these interviews over the years, what is it that makes some people fit into this particular category and others do not? Her conclusion, notice these words. She writes, "What most of us fail to understand, and what took me a decade of research to learn, is that vulnerability is the cradle of the emotions and experiences that we crave. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path." What Dr. Brown discovered is those people that were courageous and bold and wholehearted had the capacity to be open with their 0.0s. People who were not afraid to admit weakness. People who had the capacity to be open and vulnerable with those around them. Professor Brown discovered this unexpected link between acts of vulnerability and true, bold courage. In fact, she asked the question of folks in these interviews, tell me about times that you felt vulnerable, and she was surprised to discover they were also moments of great courage. Notice some of the responses from those she interviewed. Vulnerability, someone said, is sharing an unpopular opinion, standing up for myself, asking for help, saying no, starting my own business, initiating sex with my spouse, hearing how much my son wants to make first chair in the orchestra, and encouraging him while knowing that it's probably not going to happen, calling a friend whose child just died, signing my mom up for hospice care, the first date after my divorce, getting promoted and not knowing if I'm going to succeed, getting pregnant after 3 miscarriages, waiting for the biopsy to come back, reaching out to my son who's going through a difficult divorce, admitting I'm afraid, laying off employees, standing up for friends when someone else is critical or gossiping, being accountable, asking for forgiveness, having faith. These experiences and more, a mixture of incredible openness and vulnerability, admitting one's weakness and failure, taking a chance, but also great courage, wholeheartedness, living life abundantly, to use Jesus' words. Vulnerability, she discovered, is the key to wholeheartedness and strength. And as I listened to Dr. Brown's research and presentation, I was reminded of the words of our apostle, Paul. Do you remember 2 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 8? 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it, that is a thorn, away from me. But Jesus said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For here it is, when I am weak, then I am strong. Is there any more courageous figure in the whole of Christian church history than our Apostle Paul? But he says things like this: I am the chief of sinners. I am the least of the apostles. The very thing I wish to do, I do not do, and the very thing I like not to do, that is the very thing I do. Paul posts the 0.0s of his life for all to see right here in the scriptures. Why? He says it is through his weakness, through his vulnerability, that he finds strength. In fact, he believes this so deeply, he wrote an entire letter about it to the Galatian church. You remember there at the end of that book, he describes a group of people this way: they are living a spirited, abundant life. A spirited, abundant life. Why are these people living in such a way? Throughout the book, he explains they are living under the freedom of Christian grace. These people have confessed all of their weaknesses to God, and now they are living with great courage. But it's a contentious book, Galatians. For Paul says there's another approach. For there are those who choose to live under the bondage of human perfectionism. And they, Paul says, are living, quote, a cursed life. Think of it. 180-degree opposite directions. Paul says some people are touting their moral strength, but they're cursed. They're weak. But there's another approach. Openly admitting one's sinful weakness. And this leads to freedom. This leads to incredible strength. And our apostle says that we should regularly, forcefully, and publicly admit our weaknesses and our brokenness. Now, because church is a participatory sport, it is not a spectator sport, I want to invite you to stand if you can say yes to this series of 5 questions. Question number 1. If you are an imperfect person, like me, would you just stand with me tonight? Okay, sit back down. Let's be a little more specific. If you have functioned, like me, as an imperfect person in the last 12 months, would you please stand with me tonight? Okay, you can sit down. If you, like me, have functioned in the last 30 days as an imperfect human being, would you please stand with me tonight? Okay, you can sit down. Okay, now it's going to get a little more difficult. If you, like me, have functioned as an imperfect human being in the last 7 days, would you stand with me tonight? And you can sit down. Final question. If you, like me, anticipate that in the next 7 days you will probably function as an imperfect person, would you please stand with me tonight? And you can sit back down. We have just engaged in something that these scriptures term confession. Confession. Several months ago, I read through the entirety of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, with this question in mind. If we were to shape our worship services with the values of the holy assembled there in the sanctuary era, what would we emphasize? The number one thing that came to view for me as I read through the scriptures, confession. They bring lambs and goats and grain and birds showing up with this physical material at the temple. Why? Confession. You too, I see you've got a lamb. Yep, I've got a goat in my hand. Oh, they've got some wheat over there. Everybody shows up for church every single time with a physical reminder that they are a broken, sinful human being. Friends, I think preaching's important. I think music's important. I think prayer and testimony, all of it's important in worship. But none of these things dominate worship in the Old Testament era like confession. People had a tangible awareness of their brokenness, of their weakness, of their sin, and they forcefully, regularly, publicly came to grips with this reality. But what is confession exactly? I want to invite you to lean in just for a moment. Listen carefully, for these words are a bit deep. I'd like to consider the observation of the Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann. Notice what he says. The vitality of the human person depends on God's gift of breath, which is freely and graciously given without cause, but which never becomes the property or possession of the human person. Thus, human persons are dependent, vulnerable, and precarious, relying in each moment on the gracious gift of breath that makes human life possible. Moreover, this precarious condition is definitional for human existence. That is, it defines us, marking the human person from the very first moment of existence. That is, now watch this, human vulnerability is not late, not chosen, not punishment, not an aberration, not related to sin. It belongs to the healthy, original characterization of human personhood in relation to God. This is what it means to be human. Now, what is Professor Brueggemann saying here about us? Confession, yes, is admitting particular sins. I was selfish. I didn't tell the truth. I was lazy. I coveted. But more deeply, confession is admitting my sinful condition. I am a sinner. But even more deeply than that, hear me, friends, I confess my very status as a creature and not the creator. You see, even Adam and Eve, before the fall, were completely vulnerable and at the mercy and the good graces of God for every breath that they took in their life. Grace is not merely the good gift we get because we are sinners. Life itself is grace. You and I do not breathe. We do not walk. We do not have existence, even if we were perfect in the sense that we had not sinned, apart from the complete provision of God. This, my friends, is confession at its very core. He is God and I am not. And this changes everything. How? A few months ago, I was walking on the campus of Walla Walla University with William, our 3-year-old, just the two of us. He had with him a stuffed bunny rabbit and a little blanket about this size. Around the perimeter are tags. This object is the 5th member of our family. Since the boy came home from the hospital, he has slept with this little blanket. He loves it. It's his best friend. He calls it Tags or Taggy. He speaks to it like it is a human. It's everything Taggy. That night, Nicole is leading the charge, putting the children to bed, and Taggy is nowhere to be found. William can't sleep without Taggy. This is a big deal. We look in the garage, we look in the cars, we turn the whole house upside down. We cannot find Tags. Taggy is nowhere. And some of you who are parents, you know exactly what kind of crisis this is. Okay? Then it dawns on me. William had this precious object while he was in my care under my watch. And so I confessed this to Nicole, and I made my way down to the campus of Walla Walla University in the pitch dark of night. and tried to retrace the steps, looking behind trees and bushes, walking the sidewalks, looking everywhere I possibly could without success. I found myself becoming filled with anger. I was really frustrated at myself. How stupid can you be? I was saying to myself. You know what this object means to William. You know the significance to the family. How could you be so foolish? I was just beating myself up. I continued to walk around campus in the dark. No success when another feeling started to come out for me. I bet somebody stole Taggy. No. I bet there's some college student, some business major right now that's cuddling with my son's Taggy in the dorm room. And I started to get mad at everybody I saw. I thought somebody has stolen this object that rightfully belongs to my son. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at everybody in the world. Finally, I give it up and go home. Somehow, William manages to go to sleep without his Taggy. Wake up the next morning, I head to a meeting. As I'm sitting in this particular meeting, I get a text message from Nicole with this picture attached. Guess what William found in his closet? Yeah, clinging to his Taggy. But I had this revelation. There are two great fears in life. First, we are afraid that we are going to lose something. Our money, our friends, our reputation, our good health, our very lives. We are plagued by this fear that we are going to lose something. And so often it causes us to become angry with ourselves when we feel that we are not doing a good enough job protecting what is ours. But a second closely related fear, we are afraid that someone is going to steal something from us. And so we're mad. Hear me, friends. We're mad at the government because they're going to take what's rightfully ours. We're mad at big business because big business is going to take what's rightfully ours. We're mad at those people at work because they're taking our reputation. We're mad at society because they're taking the world that we've always dreamed of. We find ourselves angry with everybody else, for we are afraid that someone is going to take what is so precious to us. And so because of these two fears, because we're afraid that we're going to lose things, we're mad at ourselves, and because we're afraid that somebody's going to take what ought to be ours, we're mad at everybody else. But how about this? If I don't own anything, I can't lose anything. If I don't own anything, you can't take anything from me. Confession is saying, God, you own everything, even my very life. I confess to you that I am vulnerable. Life itself is a gift. And my friends, when I turn everything over to God, which is the central act of Christian worship, the thread that goes all the way through. When I engage in that activity at a camp meeting like this, or on a weekly basis as I worship on Sabbath morning, and I use that moment to give it all to Jesus Christ and to his Father, do you know what I experience? Jesus lifting me from the cold realities of this world into the warmth of a precious Heavenly Father in heaven. Amen.